The world is in a crisis. A pandemic is spreading. It's called liberalism. I'm a pig in a shirt, Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm your resident libtard cuck, Ben Sheets.
I'm Cleveland Mosier, and I deserve to die because I haven't read Animal Farm.
Oh, boys, the coronavirus. We braved it to go see this movie.
Yes.
I hope it was worth it for you.
Well, we should mention this is probably the last movie we're going to see in theaters for a while.
For a little while. We'll talk more about how that's going to affect our show at the end. But, yep, we are America's most infectious podcast, the Pod People. And we went to a public place where there are people and things to touch to see this movie that we're talking about today.
But the people aren't the things to touch.
We did it for you.
Don't go out and touch your people now.
We did it for you, dear listeners.
We contracted coronavirus for all of you, and to see the brand new 2020 film, The Hunt, being called the most controversial film that nobody has ever seen. But guess what, guys? We've seen it now. So that doesn't even make sense anymore.
Does that mean we're controversial by proxy, or...
Yes.
Have we been cursed?
Yep.
Cool. I'm used to it.
Cursed with the coronavirus.
We've been
the
canceled.
curse of La Corona.
We've been cursed and canceled and infected with the disease.
But now, we're getting together, and we're on the hunt for red.
Cocktober.
Well, it's because they hunt reds. Anyway, all right, we could...
Anyway, this movie is directed by Craig Zobel and written by Nick Cuse and also Damon Lindelof, which none of us realized until the credits.
Yup.
Which it does explain a lot, though.
It really does.
I know there's a lot of people out there that may be listening to this that really unironically like Watchmen.
I am one of those people. I unironically enjoyed that terrible show because it was so bad.
I tried. I tried.
See, the thing is with your enjoyment of it, Tease, it's like you were liking it so ironically that it became unironic.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a post-ironic type of thing.
I was infected.
I was laughing, but I don't think I was having a good time.
And now we're just talking about Watchmen, but it was the most fun I've ever had watching something unforgivably terrible.
Yes. Well, I brought it up because we should justify that before we dig in, because a lot of people think that show is very smartly written, and I think we're in the minority.
Yeah, well,
thinking
3
it's
monologues
very
at your end, your ending, I think, would pretty much say everything you need to. 3, like, at least. It's like 3 different villain monologues that say absolutely nothing. But that's fine. You enjoyed it. You know, good for you. And get your thrills where you want. I enjoyed Guyver, so, you know, it's whatever. I don't give a shit.
Nothing accounts for taste, but no matter how much trash we want to talk about Watchmen, I will defend that show to the grave. But yeah, it is relevant to bring up because it, I think, put this entire film into perspective for all of us when the credits rolled and we saw Damon Lindelof's name.
I looked over and I saw it click on all of our faces at about the same time. There was an audible, oh.
But I have to say, as much as I just didn't enjoy Watchmen, loathed even, I had a great time with this movie, personally.
I will say that I also enjoyed this film much for the same reasons that I enjoyed Watchmen. I think Watchmen is everything that I liked about this movie on steroids.
See, I think the reason I was able to like it in the same way as you enjoyed Watchmen is it wasn't tied to any source material that was actually quality. So I was able to just unplug and enjoy this film and enjoy all the commentary that didn't say anything. And that's fine.
I think a lot of it works despite the half-baked.
I guess commentary is the wrong word because it
stuff.
implies it comments on anything. Political references, we'll say.
Buzzword the movie.
Yeah.
I've got some more thoughts on that later because I want to ask you guys a question about that. But I think it's important that we put this film into context a little bit because they are advertising it as the most controversial film that nobody's seen.
Oh, that's bait as fuck.
Well, we should emphasize this
no.
movie originally it was supposed to come out in September.
Yes.
It got shit canned because there was a shooting right around the same time, and they were like, "This is too politically charged with a shooting that was also politically charged. We can't have this movie coming out at this time." So they shit canned it and put it in the vault, and now it's coming out in March.
It's political and it has guns in it. Did I find it controversial? Not really.
No.
At all. Because it doesn't say anything, controversial or otherwise. Which is fine. Honestly, didn't mind that fact. I'm not saying that as a complaint.
Like, that's the crux of it, is that it touts itself as like a film that has something to say about like the state of our nation.
The marketing's more obnoxious than the movie.
Politically, and it really does not.
Yeah.
It's like a baby brained political analysis.
Well, that's what I find kind of interesting because how do you guys view the ideology of this movie?
Just a bunch of platitudes.
I couldn't figure out what the ideology was.
There wasn't
in my opinion, it's enlightened centrist.
Oh, no,
the movie.
if you haven't read 1984, you deserve to die.
Yeah, if you haven't read George Orwell specifically.
Yeah, or sorry, not 1984, Animal Farm.
Animal Farm,
My bad.
yeah.
Overall, the ideology of this film was so muddled.
Enlightened centrist is a great way to put it, I think, because like it presents itself as being like so woke, as like willing to skewer the ideologies of both the left and the right while itself falling somewhere in between the two and therefore not actually saying anything.
Yeah.
The previews I found very confusing and made me nervous, as I said on the last episode, because like I couldn't tell what its ideology was, and so I was like nervous about feeling a certain way about it, and I felt the same way for most of the movie because I'm like, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about this. I don't know what it's trying to tell me,
because they caricature both sides, both the neoliberal rich people as well as the quote unquote deplorables.
Their word.
Yes, that would be okay if they had like an underlying idea to go with it. Even if like the idea was kind of shitty, it's better than having no idea.
I guess the idea is both can be bad. And that's about where it
There was a
lies.
brief period of time in the movie where I almost thought it was smart because I felt like it was trying to say that politics is not important and that it's about class, which is true. And then I realized that I was reading into something that wasn't actually there.
And also,
that was me trying to find something
There's a point
poignant.
where I saw it as both sides viewing the other side as a caricature.
Right.
Which is an interesting idea, but they totally undo that with a lot of the things they do in the film.
Here's what I'll say, though. Having seen Watchmen, I've seen David Lindelof actually try to make statements, and those are usually the things about Watchmen that make me really mad. So if I had to choose, I'd much rather choose him not making statements and evading things.
I think the primary difference between The Hunt and Watchmen is that Watchmen is extremely self-serious, which is why I find it so funny, because it's so stupid.
Like an edgy teenager,
but takes itself so seriously. And this film is...
It's wacky.
It is satire, but I'm not sure it really knows what it's satirizing.
Politics.
Right, this vague idea of politics is what it's satirizing. And I think we can all agree that, like, the individual gags are pretty funny.
Hilarious.
They're,
Like,
they're
belly
really
laughs.
solid.
I definitely laughed hard a few times in this movie.
Oh, same. I had a wonderful fucking time. It was a really weird feeling saying Lindelof's name at the end of it and realizing I enjoyed a film that he was attached to.
Realizing you enjoyed something that David Lindelof
I have a lot of resentment towards a lot of the projects he's worked on, and was very glad to finally see something that I thought was great.
Well, like you mentioned, Tease, like a lot of the underlying jokes work. Like I think they nail the rich elite NPR listening woke scold type of thing super well. And on the flip side, they have some really funny Trumpy type of jokes in there as well.
Yeah, they never use his name.
but
They did
they-
the "our president."
They're both caricatures,
Right.
Which is what I think makes a lot of it work and not feel too serious.
I will say what I appreciate about it is that it is never trying to tell you that one ideology is better than the other, because they're both bad for different reasons. I don't know if the film really realizes that, but I am glad that I never felt like I was being preached at, because there were a few times where it teetered on the edge of that, and I was worried that it was going to start doing something like that, and then it didn't.
If you feel personally attacked by anything in this movie, you need to fucking get your head out of the sand. Like, you're looking for things that aren't there. I don't care, like, if you're, like, a wealthy blue or a not so wealthy red.
Or vice versa. Honestly.
Like, if you get offended by anything in this film, like, you really need to recalibrate.
And
And that's the thing is, like, I think the marketing for this film, like, did more harm than good for our expectations, because honestly, I think that the tone of this film isn't trying to say anything either. It's wacky, it's weird, it's got fucking people just blowing up left and right for gags. It's just trying to have fun. And so I wasn't asking this movie to say anything political or whatever else like that. Just be politically flavored is fine. I didn't mind, like, my wacky campy stuff, like with weird funny buzzwords and stuff going off, because here's the thing. If any of those scenes had ended with them, like, actually, like, looking at the camera and saying, like, oh, but really, it would have been extremely obnoxious. And I was never really, like, pissed off or bothered by anything this movie said.
Well, it seems like our protagonist is entirely apolitical, which is the, I think, major indication that the film is not trying to take a side, which, I mean, when you draw the lines like you do in this movie, I think it's fine. I don't necessarily agree with the idea of not having politics, because I don't think that really exists.
Yeah, but if the politics is choosing between you,
Well, right. That's the thing, is, like, the
Trumpism.
lines that the film chooses to draw are lines that where if you pick a side, then you're an asshole for a different reason.
And also, like, Lindelof has largely been associated with the Hollywood very wealthy left. So there's a, like, if you consider, like, who was
Quote,
behind
unquote,
this movie.
left.
I was gonna say call them what they are.
Libs.
They're libs, not
like,
left.
Like, my point being, if you consider who made the film, there's a lot of, like, self-flagellation there as well. We're self-aware, you know, like, kind of qualities, like, that they sort of, like, wrote themselves into some of these, like, you know, evil lib parts. I don't think that really means anything, but
I mean, it doesn't.
yeah,
But
there's nothing in this movie does, but that's okay. Do we have anything else to say about the political parts, or can we just get into, like, the wacky action stuff?
I mean, we could talk as much as we want about the wacky action stuff, but I don't think we can talk about this movie at all and write off political anything.
oh, no. I mean,
I'm
because,
sure
because the movie doesn't.
inevitably going to come up again.
Right.
Oh, sure, but do we want to move into it?
Sure,
That's all,
absolutely,
yeah?
absolutely. We can start talking about specifics.
Yeah.
It is essentially elites versus rednecks. You said last week, Ben, that the original title for this film was Red State, Blue State.
Which is fitting. You know?
Right, yeah, sure. It's about some wealthy liberal elites who capture who they perceive to be right-wing redneck deplorables and hunt them for sport. So it's the timeless tale of the most dangerous game, but it's funny this time.
And it has some battle royale sort of qualities to it. You know, they wake up, they don't know where they are, they're gagged, they find weapons, you know, usual fare. And I thought that was like reasonably well handled. What I loved is how long this film goes without a central protagonist.
Yes, I was going to bring up the same
Well,
thing.
we should emphasize we don't know that. For the beginning section of the movie, we definitely think Emma Roberts is the lead protagonist. She's the biggest name in the movie. You know, at that point,
also spoilers, I suppose. Like right
Yeah.
off the bat, like this movie has some spoilers, and this movie is rich with subversions because Lindelof.
But yeah, we follow her very closely.
It presents a lot of the beginning stuff, like from her perspective specifically,
And the rug is pulled out from under us.
and she dies
Pretty
almost
well.
immediately.
I think all three of us were shocked. I was quite surprised when her face blew up.
I mean, one of my favorite things about the movie is that they make that a trend for a long time, is that they sort of trade off who you think is going to be the protagonist before unabashedly killing them.
It's a ballsy move.
I actually really like that.
Yeah, it was a solid-
I can see like fighting executives on that. Like, wow, who am I supposed to root for? Like, who gives a shit? I
That
just
was
want to see some
a
kills.
solid, I would say, 30 to 40 minutes of the movie. The overall, I think one of the strongest parts of this movie is its pacing.
Yeah.
It is relentless.
I would agree.
And when it ended, I was like, oh man, it felt like it was half an hour.
You know what? The
went
pacing
by so quickly.
The pacing is really quick. And I have to give credit to like the editing of this film in that like it's always very concise and clear for as quick and choppy as it is. Whether it's the fight scenes or whatever else, you always know where items are. I'm not going to give huge props to that because I think that should just be standard fare, but there are so many movies that have action sequences in them now that don't do that. And it's nice to know, okay, cool, the explosives are under the car, and like getting a shot of that, like getting quick reminders, and just you always understand like the placings in scenes. And when something is moving that quickly, you know, that can fly by a little fast.
I think in terms of its structure, this film is quite competent, and I mean it's pretty well directed. It's directed by Craig Zobel, who has not done a whole lot.
He did this movie Compliance a few years back, which is really good. It's really disturbing, really weird, very minimal. But he also, on the flip side, was the co-founder of a little site called Homestar Runner.
Very weird, right?
So all over the place, honestly.
Completely bizarre.
I think this is an interesting amalgamation of both the humor side of that as well as the very gruesome side. You know, I one thing I really liked about this film is how gruesome it got.
It is. Well, my point in bringing up Craig Zobel is that like we can say what we want about Damon Lindelof and make fun of him as much as we want, and we will continue to do so for the rest of this episode and afterwards. But he did not direct this movie, and I think that this film is quite well directed.
Yes.
For its problems and its sort of ideological vagueness, just in terms of like its pacing, how the actors are directed, all of that shit, it's pretty fucking good. I think that it's not boring. Like you, I was kind of surprised when it was over. I had felt like it had not been going on for that long, which is, I think, a hallmark of an entertaining film. Yeah, as you said, Cleveland, it's full of quote-unquote subversions. Some of them are good.
Most. I would say I didn't, and none of them bothered me. Like, really, there's nothing about this movie that bothered me, which could be a complaint, but for a lot of people that would be, I think. Like, oh, this movie, you know, I kind of wanted it to push me in a certain direction, but the fact that it is inoffensive, I think is fine. There are plenty of movies that are, and
I think I might be on the flip side this time. Usually I'm the one that really does not care much about plot holes, but there were a couple of glaring plot holes in this movie.
Let's talk about
that bothered me a little bit. Well, first off, let's talk about the subversion of the hunt to begin with. Okay, so
big spoiler.
Yes, about 2/3 of the way through the movie, they do a hard cut to 1 year prior where the main villain, I guess you could call her,
Hilary Swank.
yeah, Hilary Swank, the $1 million baby herself, gets fired because at the very beginning of the movie, we see this long text conversation, like a group chat, where they're talking about hunting deplorables.
Can't wait to go to the manor and
Manor
slaughter,
Gate,
and
is the
slaughter
bit,
a dozen deplorables or whatever.
Yeah, one of their phones gets hacked, and that gets out. And
So a bunch of like right-wing like podcasts and stuff all pick it up and they all start slamming them, and so she gets fired, sort of James Gunn style, for like
Well,
a random
they all
message.
do.
They
yeah,
all-
they
the
all
whole group thread all loses their
gets fired.
Their high executive wealthy positions.
Exactly,
are
just
lost.
for making a joke. So they decide to make the joke real.
yes, and they select, I think it's a dozen people.
Yeah, that were critical of them
Critical
online.
on them online.
It's pretty funny.
Which is, that's a funny idea.
I actually,
funny.
that was
Like,
one of my favorite things about the movie is that the villains of the movie are basically people who
It's just babies.
who get made fun of online, which is actually
Which
I
is
think
very
one of
fitting.
one of the cannier observations. I think that like that I actually thought was pretty pretty smart.
It sort of it kind of plays in the idea of the film too. It's like if you get offended by anything in the movie, you're just as bad. You're like them. You
Right.
know, it's good. It's fun. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Don't take yourself so seriously.
Exactly. Like who gives a shit?
Anyway,
I agree, but the idea of the original hunt was kind of sloppy, I would say. I don't know. It's a good bait and switch. But
do you mean like the beginning with them like their text thread
Yes,
specifically?
yeah.
Oh yeah, I like as a way to start the movie.
Oh yeah.
I rolled my eyes so hard.
yeah,
like
also it's a
dipshit.
thing where they want to keep it out of specific dates. You know, so someone watching this movie 20 years from now won't feel like this movie's as dated.
I mean, I think they did a bad fucking job of that because most of their quote unquote political commentary
is all very relevant. This entire movie is extremely dated.
Is all
Yeah.
buzzwords. I was
agree.
actually like, that's what I was gonna ask you guys about later, but we might as well do it now.
How's this movie
Like,
gonna age?
How do you think this movie's gonna age? Because I think bad. I
like
think it's gonna
milk.
age terribly.
Yeah, I had a great time watching it now, but I
don't think this movie is gonna connect with people in 10 years.
No, not at all.
Yeah, there'll be elements of it that work to that point because I don't think we'll get rid of, neoliberal woke.
No. I mean,
Maybe,
the idea.
I'll give it a bit of a
archetypes will
benefit of
still
a
be
doubt
there,
that
but
it might
some
feel
of
like
the
a time
specific
capsule.
references
The
won't work
jokes-
as much.
The snowflake references, the cuck references. It's so buzzwordy that like I don't think those kinds of jokes are gonna mean anything to people in 10 to 20 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, even next year when Hannity is dead from the coronavirus.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like it's not really saying anything, but at the same time it's dating itself so incredibly that I think it's going to work against the film in the future. I really cannot imagine that this movie is going to be particularly fun to watch down the road.
Yeah, I can definitely see it aging badly.
It's too specific.
Like
One
maybe like a time capsules itself in that as well, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't think it's clever enough to be remembered for a long time.
No.
It's a somewhat disposable movie.
Yes.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. One plot hole I did want to mention is the whole
Please.
character of Don, the old
Credited
vet.
as Dawn? 3 question marks?
Yes,
Don.
the vet.
I liked him.
He was a fun character, but the whole discussion with him and Macon Blair in the car, where Macon Blair was hinting at, why do you think we chose you specifically? And then it was revealed later in the movie that Don was maybe part of them.
Yeah.
They kind of played it off as
No, that was that was her playing her against him. Like he was one of them because you see him as an image on the wall later. They were one of the ones he selected. They were. He just was.
I got the point that Hilary Swank was trying to play
manipulator.
Crystal against Don.
And Crystal's a survivalist. She's not going to take the risk, and she just she moves on. Also, he goes to shoot, so
Yeah. I was okay
but
with
his
that.
picture's on the wall, and she doesn't answer directly in Lindelof fashion, but it's quite clear there isn't an alternative there. He wasn't working with them.
it just felt like a cheap double subversion for the sake of baiting and switching and then going back on it.
Yeah, it's cheap, but the whole movie's cheap.
I don't know. I thought the whole ambiguity. I mean, it's not ambiguous to me, but the whole
in the moment it is,
the whole feigned ambiguity around Dawn. But even so, when we're hearing Hilary Swank's voice over the radio and she's acting and she's saying oh, Dawn, is she dead? Did you do it? And it's oh, is he really one of them? For me that was pretty obvious that she is trying to turn.
It's a ploy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah. I feel like that scene where he refuses to put down his gun either undermines that scene if he's not in on it, because he could easily just put down his gun.
Oh no, but he's not going to put down his gun. That's his character. That makes sense for him.
He's a yeehaw motherfucker.
Yeah, he's not you're going to get a guy to disarm. Like maybe she's a traitor. He doesn't know. He just woke up in this place. So he's not sure either.
I don't know, man, because they were working with each other for so long that having a sudden questioning of who's who.
I mean, but they didn't know who each other until this scenario.
Yeah, they've been together for a while, but also the whole time they've been together, they've been constantly reinforced the message of trust no one. Like the guy in the car, he didn't know to trust her. And so they set that theme up in advance.
And the guy who is pretending to be the refugee, who is actually one of the elite guys.
And then also,
I know he wasn't there,
but they're setting up the theme.
But Crystal was, so it would make sense that she wouldn't trust somebody that she thought was on her side.
Yeah.
So I think that
because literally everyone else has been that.
I think that
no,
theme
it's more
is
the
well
motivation of Don. I don't really buy that he wouldn't put down his weapon as much as you guys do, especially after she's saved him multiple times.
Well, but she saved him by being ruthless, by taking no chances. We've seen her take no chances throughout this movie.
and he knows she's ruthless.
I buy it because the people that they have kidnapped and are hunting are pretty much all portrayed as Second Amendment yeehaw motherfuckers who are the types of people who, if somebody who's pointing a gun at them tells them to put down their gun, they're not gonna do it. I found that believable for his character.
Because they're all cartoon characters. And, a cartoon character of that stereotype would do that. He wouldn't want to put his gun down.
Sure. I thought it was a little contrived.
Where I will agree that it is unclear in a bad way is that he seems to know Macon Blair. When Macon Blair shows up, he's we're saved. And it's that was confusing to me because it seemed like he knew who Macon Blair was. And if that's the case, then that muddies the water.
Wait, when was that?
When they're at the refugee camp, when they get picked up by the Croatian army and Macon Blair shows up to get them out of there. And he's driving them in the car.
Oh, that's Macon Blair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I got it.
Just shaved.
And also fat. Macon Blair
has always been a little chubby.
Have you he's not nearly that big in Green Room or Blue Ruin or Murder Party.
Wait. What character is he in Green Room?
He's Patrick Stewart's second in command, the one who seems kind of who seems like he's kind of not okay with the whole thing that's going on in Green Room, who they let go at the end.
Oh yeah, I would never have made that connection.
Yeah, it's the same dude.
Okay.
Anyway, the point is Macon Blair's put on a lot of weight. I almost didn't recognize him because how fat he was.
No, I think the forced ambiguity of that character was a little contrived and sloppy. That's all I'm trying to say. To the point where it felt like it undermined things. The thing is, overall, though, like, this movie is so relentless in its pacing and pushing forward that I can, push some of that aside for the most part. It's definitely a dumb movie. It moves fast enough that I don't mind it because it doesn't have enough time to get too self-serious about that.
The kills. Specifically, I adored the practicals in this movie. A lot of those blood explosions were fun. The action sequences, the choreography was a delight. Particularly like the end fight scene as well, when they're throwing things at each other. There's a lot of like objects utilized in that sequence.
They keep throwing each other through glass, and then at one point she's about to do it, and Hilary Swank's like, no glass. And so she opens the door and it throws her through.
Yeah,
no more glass. Like
the choreography was really fun. One of my favorite parts was early in the fight where they had brought up early in the movie that there was a fancy bottle of champagne that they brought from the Titanic and rescued from the Titanic, and our main character throws it at Hilary Swank, and she like dives out of her way to catch it so it doesn't break.
That little champagne gag is such a fun, like, multiple callback that it gets brought up several times.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite gags in the movie.
Yeah, Glenn Howerton's character brings it up at the very beginning. He's one of my favorite characters. I was honestly disappointed that he died as early as he did. I thought that was a perfect casting, considering how he plays Dennis on Always Sunny, and I thought that there was a great translation between those characters. Like, he plays the sociopath very well. That was delightful to see him. But yeah, he brings up like the case of champagne that was rescued from the wreck of the Titanic by like a robotic submarine, and like, is that the champagne? And the flight attendant is like, nope, this is just regular champagne. And then at the end we get the actual champagne, and Hilary Swank dives to save it, like you said. And then after Crystal has killed her, she takes the champagne and gets on the private jet and just drinks it straight from the bottle.
I love she cauterizes her wound with the flambe,
the creme brulee torch.
Creme brulee torch, which we'd seen earlier in the fight. I also loved how like she during the fight she activates the creme brulee torch like that's gonna do anything, and
like
it doesn't.
Yeah.
There's some really fun sequences throughout.
I will say, as we were talking about like the successful versus the unsuccessful subversions in the movie, I thought one of the more successful ones for me was that when Hilary Swank was like choosing the people that they kidnapped, she got the wrong person when she got Crystal, because she thought that she was some person online whose username was Justice for Y'all, which is very good.
Yeah,
I might add.
that.
Very good, good username.
Yeehaw.
And it turned out to be a completely different person who spelled her name slightly different.
And she gets mail for her sometimes. Hilarious.
I thought that was a really, really good twist.
Oh yeah.
Man, one of the things with that twist, though, the only minor thing about it is I feel like it kind of undermines the character as a deplorable, which I mean is fine because she's very apolitical in the movie.
Well, right, that's the thing, is like she's the only character who never once says anything political. She has combat training because she was in Afghanistan, as we find out, and she's a survivalist. But she doesn't ever have politics, basically, which I think is, as I said before, unrealistic. But this is not a movie that I'm necessarily asking for realism.
I mean, I've had plenty of vets who are apolitical.
Maybe I'll cut this out, but if you're apolitical, you're uninformed. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm just countering to it being unrealistic. That person does exist.
Okay.
That's all.
Sure. Yeah, maybe unrealistic was the wrong word, but I did like that subversion is my overall point.
I agree with that too. I really like that her character just sort of shows up out of nowhere. She comes across almost as like a Clint Eastwood character, like very fistful of dollars, just shows up. We don't get her backstory right off the bat. We just see this person like survive in this really threatening environment, and it makes us ask why. Why is this person doing so well?
The expressionness she brings to the character, especially in her eyes. There's just a couple moments in the
Oh
film
my God.
where she has these crazy eyes that work so perfectly for the scenes. Like one of my favorites is when they're at the gas station.
Yes.
And she's going to buy cigarettes, and they overcharge her for cigarettes, and she pulls the trigger on him, essentially.
That's how she knows
Yeah.
that it's fake.
Yeah, in Kentucky, cigarettes are $6. Arkansas.
Yeah, in Arkansas, cigarettes are $6. You fucked up, bitch. Like,
Oh god, that line is so good.
there's
Like,
a
you
lot-
fucked up, bitch.
like she's got a lot of one-liners.
funny.
She is probably my favorite performance in the film.
Easily.
Yeah,
she's so charismatic.
Yeah, like
She's got those crazy eyes.
she's funny. She's a good action hero. Like, she is delightful. She's one of my overall favorite things of the movie. Like, despite my problems with it, she as a character is always very fun to watch.
You don't get that kind of country accent too often in films either. Like so often,
Oh,
like it's just like you just get like a twang, but like she
She's from
feels pretty.
Mississippi. She's got that deep South accent.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear that in a movie.
Does it make you feel at home?
Yeah, man,
Cleveland?
growing up hearing that accent, it's nice. It's nice hearing that. Like she studied the part. Like you could tell. I appreciate it.
Oh, one of the gore scenes that we didn't mention yet that I really enjoyed was early on with the spike pit.
Oh, I love the spike
Getting
pit.
hurled back.
That's one of my favorite set pieces in the movie.
The two grenades, like throwing the one and not going off. That's a good.
Yeah,
bit.
there are a lot of really good gags.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. The girl falling into the spike pit and then getting pulled out and being okay, and then getting thrown back into the spike pit. Also, thought it was funny that she said, "It's my birthday tomorrow. I'm gonna eat a whole pie," and we're recording this on
Pie Day.
National Pie Day.
Yeah.
3.14.
It is.
Yeah.
It is 3:14 today. So that was fun.
What a cool coincidence. Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like, the effects of this movie are really solid. Like, it's got a great amount of like fun blood and gore, and does it very well and unashamedly. We talked about it some at the beginning, but like how you continue, like, for a big chunk of the movie, think that a certain person is your protagonist until they die suddenly and horrifically, and then all of a sudden somebody else is your protagonist. And I love that they just did that over and over again, and that they were not ashamed to kill those people immediately. Didn't shy away from that, and that's what I wanted from this movie. I wanted dumb fun, and I got a lot of dumb fun.
Yes. Overall, that's what saved this movie for me, is how fun it was. A lot of the jokes, you know, for the most part land too, which is nice, because they could easily just be cheap throwaway stuff. They feel clever enough.
Yeah, I think the funniest jokes are the ones that don't date themselves too terribly. I think the ones that are like particularly specific kind of made me roll my eyes.
There were a
mentioned
few
it.
though that were political that I did enjoy, like the oops, sorry, didn't mean to gender us, and like other stuff that made me giggle a little bit.
That was kind of fun. Yeah,
It's very buzzwordy, and,
Like I mentioned,
and it's
like
generally the kind of thing that would bother me. So
Yeah.
I was surprised how many times like it was actually able to get chuckles out of
the
me.
deplorable thing I found obnoxious.
Yes.
And the cuck thing I found obnoxious. As fun as that word is to use in this context, it did feel very buzzwordy. It's like, he's right wing, so he uses cuck. Oh, they're left wing, so they use the word snowflake. Like that, like talking about the girl getting thrown into the pit twice, and the second time when like she's missing her lower half and her guts are spilling out, and she tells the guy like, hey, shoot me, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna do that, and she grabs the gun and says, okay, snowflake. That got a big eye roll out of me too.
I thought it was pretty funny.
I thought it was kind of funny.
I thought that was fucking annoying. I thought that was
I think like, because it was paired with her like blowing her, like calling someone a snowflake and then fucking axing yourself is like a pretty funny concept.
I mean, the action itself of shooting herself when she is missing her lower half, I think is fine. It's the snowflake particularly that I think is just so dated and obnoxious and just like,
yeah, it comes across a little hello fellow kids, like,
yeah.
For the most part, like the jokes weren't that offensive, but there were a couple that like surprised me in like how edgy they were. Particularly there was like an anti-Semitic joke by Don talking about the deep state Jewish conspiracy or something like that, talking about Hannity and stuff, which I was surprised they went there. It was
I thought
funny,
the Hannity
though.
joke was pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too, like considering it's coming from these characters, it feels like of course they would say this stuff. So
I mean,
it's like cartoon caricatures,
yeah, as caricatures for sure. I agree with that. It's just too buzzwordy. I think it's just like I think you can make these jokes and make fun of these groups of people without like dating yourself so specifically.
You know, it's a great example of that. You know,
what
this movie reminded me of, but I think did a better job with that, and playing up like the concepts of classism. That's Ready or Not.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's Ready or Not. I think Ready or Not does a much better job of saying a lot of the same things. Because Ready or Not still has a lot of commentary on classism, like with the family coming into their inheritance and whatnot.
It's because class struggle is timeless.
Also, Ready or Not wasn't written by David.
I mean, yeah, but class struggle is timeless and ultimately has nothing to do with politics. Therefore, it does not date itself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, if we're gonna make that comparison, and I agree, I actually did think of Ready or Not several times, and Ready or Not is a immeasurably better film.
It's got a lot of people blowing up for gags.
Here's a question.
They both
Do you
have
think
that.
this movie would be more successful if it leaned harder into the politics or was less political?
I think this
overall?
movie would be a lot more successful if it didn't come out right during the height of the coronavirus. I think that this movie is going to do bad no matter what happens.
I'm
kinda
not
hate that a
talking
little
about
bit.
box office success. I'm talking about successful as a good movie.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I don't think it could be less political. I think
it could.
Well, I don't think it could be less political by being political at all.
What do you mean?
I mean, if you remove the buzzwords and the political alignments of the characters, then you just have like a wealthy hunting the poor movie, and it wouldn't be
Right,
red
which
state
is-
versus blue state.
But that's Ben's point exactly. Would it be more successful if it was?
Oh, I see. Okay, no,
if
no,
it was
you're right.
more political and
My bad,
leaned
my bad.
more into its politics, or if it was less political and leaned into classism, i.e. Ready or Not or Knives Out, which not a horror movie, but I think one of my favorite things about Knives Out, which was a great fucking movie, is that all of the wealthy family members all have different politics, but they come together as soon as their fortune is threatened, that their class unites them over their political beliefs. And I think that this movie would be better if it did the same thing.
Well, it's
To answer that
interesting.
question.
It's interesting you mentioned Knives Out because there were a couple cringeworthy lines in Knives Out which will be dated really badly, particularly like the MAGA stuff. It's very subdued in that movie, even
Yeah.
more so than this, obviously.
I think Knives Out will age much better than this movie.
Yes. But the point stands where, you know, I think if you removed a lot of those overt references and just had this a little more general, it could work.
Well, the reason I think it works in Knives Out, despite the fact that specific references might be dated, it does a really great job to illustrate that point that I just brought up, that regardless of their politics, what unites them is their money being threatened. So it shows that politics is unimportant and class solidarity is. I think that is what they could maybe be less specific, but that those examples illustrate that well. And I would have liked to see more of that in this movie, because the stuff that annoyed me about this movie was the very specific political stuff. The less general stuff that's the kind of shit that made me roll my eyes. The deplorable shit, the snowflake shit, the cuck shit. Like it's all so specific to like the time that this movie is made that I don't think that people are going to be able to relate to that in the fucking 20 years down the line, 50 years, 100 years down the line.
Yeah, no, sorry I misinterpreted that earlier. I agree. I think it would be better if it was less political. I think there's a way to do it if it was, but I think that they're running a higher risk of being extremely cringy if they had gone more politically.
Oh yeah.
The thing is, too, on the flip side, though, I think this movie could be more successful if it was more political, but if it knew what it was saying with its politics more.
Yeah, but with David Lindelof behind the wheel, that's not gonna happen.
That's why with Damon Lindelof at the helm, I'm kind of glad that it wasn't.
Same. Oh, I'm very
Well, I
glad.
mean, for sure. I mean,
agree.
he doesn't know what his own politics.
What
is,
are
I think.
masks?
Yeah, right. But I guess my follow-up question to that is, you say it could be more successful if it was more political, if it actually took a stance. But if it did take a stance and knew what it was talking about, what stance would you want it to take? The one that aligns with your own beliefs, or do you think it would still be successful if it took a harder stance that aligned with the opposite end of the spectrum, I suppose?
Well, I think either, in a way. The reason I mention that is because this movie, like we mentioned earlier, is kind of enlightened centrism, both sides bad. And both sides, in fairness, are very insufferable. When you put neoliberalism and Trumpism side by side. But what I would love to see is, we see the solidarity in class with the rich neoliberals,
right?
But we don't see as much of the red state Trumpy people being like, oh, we're poor, the conditions have like led us to this point, and it's more just general, oh, we're Second Amendment, caricature, gun right people.
I don't like the other side because they have different buzzwords than I do.
Yeah,
It's almost like this was written by a wealthy person.
Exactly.
Oh my god, crazy.
Yeah,
Like, it's a self-flagellation comment earlier. Like,
I think that's really what like the politics of this movie comes down to, is that it doesn't actually have anything to do with ideological differences. It's your buzzwords versus my buzzwords. All of the quote unquote deplorable characters are always talking about like Second Amendment and right to defend yourself, whereas the elite characters are talking about like identity politics and climate change being real, and I bet he uses the N-word, and it's like there's not any actual politics there. It's literally just your buzzwords versus my buzzwords, and that's what I find
it's
really,
stereotypes.
that's what I find really
other,
frustrating.
party members.
And an interesting thing is, one really telling line is our main character at one point asks if they're actually smart or if they're just dumb people pretending to be smart.
Right.
And
if they're smart people pretending to be dumb, or dumb people pretending to be smart.
And it's definitely clear that like the rich people are dumb people pretending to be smart, but all of the Trump people are just dumb people that are dumb.
Yeah.
You know, there's no the complexity to that at all. Speaking of more political, I think what I mean by that is seeing more complexity in that.
Oh, for sure.
I think that could have been more interesting as well.
I agree.
I think my opinion is still like less political, more classist. I think that is more relatable, and I think is something that that ignores that ultimately.
Well,
ignores
and that's
politics.
in some ways that's more political, but
Maybe,
a
yeah.
different kind.
Sure,
of political.
a different kind of politics. Different, yeah. I guess when I'm thinking about political in terms of this film, it is, as the original title is, Red State versus Blue State. I think that is the wrong kind of politics to like
Inject into a movie.
inject, yeah. And I mean, that's not to say like, I mean, we obviously have multiple films that just came out recently that do classist stories well.
Here's another question for you guys. Do you think neoliberals or Trump people will take this movie under their helm as their movie more?
Under their helm. I think you're going to say the opposite. Get angry over. Which my answer is going to be.
We could ask that as well.
I mean, it's the same question basically.
Yeah,
but,
That's true. I would say the internet is a massive rage fuel machine in both.
I think both for different reasons, but if I had to say what side does this film relate more strongly to, weirdly enough, I would say the Trump people. I think that though they are satirized in similar ways as the neolib elites,
They're still the victims in this movie.
I think that they're that is exactly it. Is that they are still portrayed as the victims and are
they have no agency
and portrayed as undeserving of what is happening to them. And so I think that honestly, like, if you take a side in this movie, once again, kind of like you said, Cleveland, in the inverse of if you're offended by this movie, I think if you also if you think this movie is taking a strong stance one way or another, you are similarly baby-brained. But
you need to reevaluate some shit and look at actual policies.
Well, right, but I do think that for baby-brained people,
where politics is a football game.
the right will identify with this movie more than
one of the
more than
funniest
left
things
will.
though in the lead up to this movie is I'm pretty sure the right played a big role in getting this movie shit canned the first time because they don't understand satire. And they saw a movie about rich people hunting deplorables, and they were like, no, we can't have a movie that encourages this type of violence against us.
Not in my America.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were
It's hard
folks
to
out
say.
there like that.
Honestly,
I would believe
I will
that.
say that after seeing this movie, I don't think this movie takes a bold enough stance in either direction that it's going to be particularly inflammatory to anybody. You know, the movie just came out. I will give it a couple of weeks to see if I hear anybody complaining about it on the internet, but I'm really not expecting that. As much as I had fun with this movie, seeing it in theaters and laughed a few times, I think this movie is going to be very, very quickly forgotten and not dredged up again.
Here's what I'll say. We talked about how this movie is going to age. Clearly, you can tell I'm quite sleepy. And I think a good comparative is it's not going to age like milk. Even when you like take how poorly the buzzwords are going to age and whatnot, there's still a lot of fun subversions for the most dangerous game elements of this film. Like, I think it'll still be like generally like entertaining to watch as a dumb popcorn movie. It's going to age like soda. It's going to lose its fizz after a time.
Honestly, I can get down with that analogy. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, it's going to go flat.
Yeah.
But
Still drinkable.
Still fine.
Yeah, still drinkable.
I don't anticipate hearing many people talking about this movie overall. No. You know,
I think we've talked about it.
Especially,
most people ever will.
I mean, right, exactly, because it's literally our fucking job to do so.
Yeah.
Despite its attempt at marketing itself as a extremely controversial film, I think in many ways it's quite safe. Are y'all ready to rate?
Yeah.
I'm
100.
gonna
Let's
slap
go.
a rating on top
Let's roll.
of that. Yeah, this movie was fun. I thought its politics, or rather lack thereof, I found very frustrating. Damon Lindelof is a hack. Watchmen is fun. This movie, fuck it, 3.5. Yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna give it a 3.5 as well. I think some of the underlying ideas of this movie are muddled and messy, sloppy, but it is a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it for that much at least. Definitely worth turning your brain off a little bit and just enjoying the very nowness of it.
I'm a trash man. I like slop. Fuck it. I belly laughs, and I was, I think, the most apprehensive going into this one. If I'd known it was gonna be Lindelof, I would have gone in with even lower expectations somehow. I almost didn't want to cover this one on the podcast. I never voiced that, but I definitely felt it. And
You literally voiced it on the podcast last week.
oh, I have voiced that. Okay, never mind, and it's recorded. So there we go. So I would definitely would. Okay. Anyway, well, in that case, yeah, I definitely, I wasn't really keen on the film going in, and was pretty pleasantly surprised by the wacky goofiness of it, and what I liked, I really liked. I'm gonna give it a healthy 4.
All right, cool. Well, that will give The Hunt an average of 3.7 out of 5 pods.
Not bad.
This will be another one of those ones where see it or don't. I would be interested to hear other people's opinions on it. If you thought it was fun, if it offended you, if it annoyed you, if you really identified with it. I would really be curious to hear. I think
there's
really
room.
be curious to hear from those people who really identified with it.
I think that there's room to be like offended by this movie and not be baby brained, but I don't know what that perspective would be. But I think there's room for it.
Well, anyway, that's The Hunt.
Let's clear out the elephant in the room with this big ol' coronavirus.
Aside from our many jokes about it, it is a thing that is going to affect the next few episodes of the podcast.
Few months, probably.
Likely. Next
Corona.
Next week was supposed to be A Quiet Place 2.
Yeah, we had a good chunk of movies, new movies coming out. Quiet Place 2 was going to be next week. New Mutants was coming out soon after that. End of April was, I think, Saint Maud was supposed to come out. If not, end of this month. Antlers. The new Saw movie is in May. I have a feeling that's going to be delayed as well.
So looks like a lot of classics. We're going to be covering some classics.
Yeah, anyway, the point is most of these films have been postponed, I think indefinitely. I don't think any of them have been pushed back to specific dates.
Nope, not as far as I know.
Don't postpone your listening.
No,
because
no,
we're
no.
going to be covering some good old shit.
When you're quarantined in your house, trying to avoid the coronavirus,
Come and quarantine yourselves with us.
right, we'll still be here, and we're just gonna do things as usual, minus the new films, because there won't be any to talk about. So we're just gonna be doing our normal rotation of picks.
And I mean, hey, there's a lot of movies that we really ought to talk about, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, there's a fucking bajillion. Like, don't worry, the podcast will continue.
There's some heat in the kitchen, some fire whipping up just for you.
And we're creeping up on our 100th episode. We won't spoil what that's gonna be yet, but it will be coming soon.
We have a plan.
But anyway, next week, because A Quiet Place 2 has been postponed, it will be Cleveland's pick. And Cleveland, what did you pick for us to talk about next week?
Another film that I watched the trailer for way over a decade ago and never got around to seeing, but it had some cool special effects in it, and that's Dark City.
I'm pretty
We're gonna
stoked.
see if it's any good.
I'm pretty stoked for this one because it's also been on my list for a while and I've never seen it.
I have not seen it either.
So this is an older film that none of us have seen, so it'll be fresh perspectives all around.
I like picking ones that none of us have seen.
I
into
honestly
that.
like I've been like Dark City has been on my list since college, so I'm excited to finally get an opportunity.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. I've heard good things.
Cool. Well, that'll be next week. Tune back in for our thoughts on Dark City. Before we sign off, though, even though the virus is raging, we still got to get paid. So, Cleveland, who's our sponsor this week?
Have you ever wanted to wash your hands?
Yeah.
You should do it. If you have that feeling, you should wash your hands. Have you ever felt like coughing and, in a public place? Well, cough into your elbow. Have you ever done the same but with sneezes? Use your elbow. And also, don't open your door with your elbow that you coughed or sneezed into. And if you have coronavirus, maybe don't go to a concert.
As if there are any left.
Yeah, well.
They're all canceled.
I guess what I should say is if you had coronavirus and you went to a concert, shame. This has been a PSA. This episode was brought to you by
Containment procedures.
Yep.
The CDC.
Well, it would be, I guess, but we're getting political.
The CDC, the Centers for Coronavirus.
Wow, and just like that, we've already been more political than the hunt was. Good job, guys.
I don't know what you're talking about, but thank you anyway, CDC.
I don't know what I'm talking about either.
Well, then we better get out of here before none of us know what we're talking about. Podcast things. We're on Apple Podcasts.
Help us.
Go hit please help us. We are quarantined in this house.
The sponsor shelf has been silent.
The
I hear
only
no
light
voices.
in our life left is 5-star ratings and reviews.
Thank you. Yes, as Ben so eloquently said, the only thing that will cure our coronavirus is a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts. So don't let your favorite boys suffer in shame of low reviews.
Yeah. You heard it here, folks. You heard it right here, first and foremost.
For the latest in coronavirus news as it relates to this podcast and nothing else, then follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod. For the latest in the movies that we talk about on the show, there's letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you can find the movies that we've talked about and the numbers. We've seen them and we've provided them.
You've seen the numbers.
I like this inflection, and my Twitter is Mr. Sheets, where you can follow all my coronavirus updates and stay updated on what I'm watching and political memes.
Well, I'm not one for derailing trains, so you can find me tweeting on the Twitter at Light Arc Studio rarely, and you can also find my work on ArtStation. This is getting exhausting, guys.
Well,
you can find my work on ArtStation, and you can also, of course, find our game that we've all worked on as well. It Stares Back on Steam.
It Stares
Go check
Back
it out.
is actually immune to the coronavirus, so it will be there regardless of infection.
You're quarantined in your house.
There.
You don't got anything better
got
to
nothing to do. Buy
than
it.
pick
Great
up
time.
our
Check it
video
out.
game and play it.
Support indie games, buy our $6 game and play it.
Yeah, not even all indie games, just us.
Just us specifically.
Fuck other indie games. Fuck the competition. Come give us money.
I am on Twitter doing things at Deep State Aussie.
JK, I love indie games. Please don't get mad at me. I love you all.
We
support
love,
whatever indie games you want.
We support indie games and podcasts and hand sanitizer.
And ham sanitizer.
Yes.
Sanitize your hams, people.
And toilet paper, which is in short
Oh,
supply.
yeah, you know what? Tag that onto my fucking PSA. Don't grab 8,000 things of toilet paper, you assholes.
Too late. Everybody's done it.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, I went to the... Yeah, that was ridiculous. Anyway,
All right,
that's all.
Wash your hands, cover your mouth when you sneeze.
Don't be an asshole.
Goodbye.